Being down in the capital was kind of interesting, partly because my family live in Essex, where there's recently been this big thing about, I'm sure people work connections in the room. I renounce everything I just said and I'll be willing to write whatever you want me to as long as it pays. Being down in the capital was kind of interesting, partly because my family live in Essex, where there's recently been this big thing about, I'm sure people have seen this in the paper, about them trying to move on a large camp of travellers who have legal ownership of the land, but there's a whole debate about whether or not they should technically be there. There was a bunch of people who have been camping for a number of years outside the Houses of Parliament who this weekend were moved along by the police, and the majority of them have moved about 5 yards down the road and just set up shop there again, which I thought was kind of interesting. And just generally being in the capital obviously puts me in a somewhat political state of mind, and given the subject of this evening, I thought I might fling a little bit of that out there. I've got a new piece which I'd like to do in a minute, but for the moment I'm going to do a piece which a few of you may have heard, which is kind of in support, in support of events like this, of arts-funded events, of poetry evenings, of literary associations. I read something in the newspaper that by this time next year, about 70 or 80% of the organisations in this country won't exist anymore because they've lost government funding, which got my blood up slightly. So I decided to write this piece. It's called I Already Know. Feel free to join in when the chorus comes along. Before we begin, it's vital to establish one simple thing. That I already know how full of shit you are. So in case you try to justify your blatant self-indulgent lies, thinking you can be excused by moralistic platitudes, how you did everything you could to strive towards the greater good, and how every sin that you commit is really for our benefit, I already know how full of shit you are. So when you're caught embezzling or filing false expenses claims to supplement what you perceive to be an insufficient wage, you claim the stress of politics can lead to unexpected costs and that a week or two in Malibu can really take the pressure off. Well, you'll excuse me if I scoff, but I already know how full of shit you are. So now that you've been cutting funds with absolute impunity, you're turning your attention to the poetry community. While corrupt and bloated governments have absolute immunity as beauty, truth and art are killed at every opportunity. Depressing that I'm 25, yet none of this is new to me, because I already know how full of shit you are. You'd rather spend our money bombing children in the Middle East than give our children access to a smattering of poetry. These vultures cut our culture to the bone and claim it's for the best, then try to keep us all distracted with festivities when royals wed. I don't intend to cause offence, but something really must be said, because we all know how full of shit they are. We're all in this together, claims our hypocrite-elect, yet he had 30 million in the bank last time anybody checked. These vermin stuff their cheeks with cash for fear the ship is sinking, splutter platitudes through mouthfuls of our lifeblood they've been drinking. They can't stand art and poetry as both promote free thinking, and then we all know how full of shit they are. Socrates, when asked to plead in court for some forgiveness, declared the unexamined life was simply not worth living. When asked to cut arts funding and devote it to the war, Sir Winston Churchill asked, and gentlemen, what are we fighting for? We cannot be a culture without music, art and poetry, just martyrs to these heartless bastards ruled by greed and industry, feasting ceaselessly on our innocence and decency. And I, for one, will fight these beastly fascist freaks with every still-breathing, heart-beating piece of me, lest we be sucked into the gut of this corrupt mockery of democracy, and then we'll really know exactly how full of shit. Thank you.